Previously, Shaun used his sharp instincts to save a mentally unstable homeless man. He discovered a hidden brain tumor and helped reunite the man with his family. At the same time, he also experienced the tragedy of a failed surgery, carrying the emotional weight and responsibility deep within. Even when doubted and misunderstood, Shaun continues to prove through his actions that being different doesn't mean he can't be a good doctor. In this new episode, even more challenges lie ahead. How will Shaun respond? A woman came in with an inflamed finger from a manicure, but Shaun shocked everyone by recommending she have the entire finger amputated. He explained that Jazz had joint inflammation, likely caused by a flesh-eating bacteria. If they didn't act fast, the infection would spread through her body and become fatal. But Jazz was a violinist. If her finger were amputated, her music career would be over. Morgan, who was on duty with Shaun, disagreed. She told Shaun not to jump to conclusions. Flesh-eating bacteria was rare, and it was probably just a minor paronychia. Draining the pus should be enough. Although Shaun stood firmly by his diagnosis, his autism made him focus solely on the illness, while Morgan, thinking about Jazz's future, chose to wait and observe. After all, losing a finger could mean losing her entire life's purpose. Persuaded by Morgan, Jazz agreed to wait and follow her plan. But Shaun wouldn't let it go. He pointed out that Jazz's body temperature was rising rapidly, and soon she'd develop rashes and swelling. This wasn't paronychia. It had to be a flesh-eating infection. Jazz panicked at his words. Morgan had no choice but to pull Shaun aside and lecture him. But Shaun didn't budge. His eyes stayed locked on Jazz's temperature monitor. Within seconds, her temperature shot up to 39 degrees Celsius. Morgan could no longer deny the reality. They removed part of Jazz's finger tissue for testing, and just as Shaun predicted, the fat and fascia at the edges had already necrotized, classic signs of a flesh-eating infection. Morgan stood there, stunned. But the problems didn't stop there. While operating, Shaun smelled something rotten, like sulfur. That meant they were already past the golden treatment window. Sure enough, Jazz didn't wake up after surgery. Soon, the monitor started showing abnormal readings. Shaun realized she was going into septic shock. The infection had reached her bones. Morgan knew then. Jazz would need an amputation. Otherwise, the infection would spread throughout her body. While Jazz was still unconscious, they had to act fast. The doctors used a bone saw and removed her entire arm. But that didn't mean she was out of danger. No one knew if any bacteria still remained inside her body. To be safe, Jazz had to be placed in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber for post-op sterilization, and she needed a doctor by her side. Feeling guilty, Morgan volunteered to stay with her. Soon, Jazz regained consciousness. Morgan gently explained everything. But the moment Jazz saw her missing arm, she broke down completely. She blamed everything on Morgan, saying it was her fault for not listening to Shaun in the first place, which caused her to miss the critical treatment window. Afterward, Morgan was deeply frustrated. Shaun had only focused on treating the illness without considering the patient's future. She had done the opposite, and still made a devastating mistake. Was her way of thinking wrong? Are doctors supposed to be cold and ruthless? Meanwhile, Santiago came in with a nail sticking out of his forehead, but all he felt was an itch. The doctors ran a scan. Good news, it barely grazed his skull. They could pull it out and he'd be fine to leave. Bad news, he owed $250 in medical fees. His brother Armando was furious and felt like they'd been ripped off. But then Santiago suddenly clutched his chest in pain. His blood pressure plummeted. Shaun examined him and found another nail, this one embedded deep in his tailbone. Surgery was the only option. In the OR, they removed the nail quickly, but it had punctured one of Santiago's kidneys. The wound was too large to be repaired, so they had to remove the kidney. Luckily, humans can survive with just one kidney. But then Shaun noticed something. Santiago only had one kidney to begin with. Now, the only way to save his life was through a transplant, but time was running out. Where could they find a match so quickly? The best solution was to ask Santiago's brother to be the kidney donor. So Shaun carefully explained all the risks of the transplant to Armando, ranging from heavy bleeding and infections to potential lifelong complications. After hearing that, the big question remained. Would Armando still sign the consent form? He didn't want to agree for nothing, so he made a simple request. Santiago had to sell the family business and give all the money to him. It turned out the company was a legacy left by their father to Santiago. Armando had coveted it for years, and now he finally saw his chance. But Santiago refused outright, and the negotiation ended in frustration. Still, no matter how stubborn Santiago was, his kidney wouldn't last much longer. Shaun also advised him to sell the company. Staying alive was more important. But Santiago stood by his decision. Then suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his arm. When Shaun rushed over to check, blood gushed out. Clearly things had taken a turn for the worse. Finding a matching kidney was now urgent. Shaun had no choice but to personally step in and mediate the brothers' conflict. While talking to Armando, Shaun uncovered another truth. Their father had always treated Santiago like a tool, but through a childhood lens of denial, Santiago had seen it as motivation. Armando had seen through this long ago.
You know what he told me on his deathbed? Said that he wasn't proud of Santi for following in his footsteps. That he was disappointed that he settled.
You should tell your brother that.
That's why he wanted his brother to break free from it all. Shaun didn't sugarcoat anything. He told Armando that if you don't speak your heart, no one will ever understand you. Armando took those words to heart. He told Santiago that the company was in decline. If he didn't sell, it would only drag him down. Now he could let go and start looking for a new opportunity. Armando's words might not have convinced his brother right away, but after speaking from the heart, he still signed the transplant consent form without hesitation. The transplant was a complete success. Later, Shaun wheeled Armando into Santiago's hospital room. When Santiago learned that it was his brother who saved him, he offered a sincere thank you. Dawn and her husband Todd were in a car accident. Todd only suffered a dislocated hip, and Shaun performed a hip reduction to treat him. But Dawn wasn't so lucky. Doctors found internal bleeding in her abdomen and rushed her into surgery. But when they opened her up, they were shocked to discover she was pregnant, 2 months along. The crash had caused a miscarriage, which explained her severe condition. Shaun broke the news to Todd, but Todd was even more confused. He said there had to be a mistake. He'd had a vasectomy before they got married. He confronted Dawn directly, but she insisted she would never cheat on him. Later, during a routine exam, Dawn suddenly kissed Shaun. Shaun froze, completely stunned, and ran out of the room in panic. Word of the incident reached Todd, and he stormed into the room demanding answers. Dawn tried to make excuses, but Todd had already checked their finances and discovered their savings had mysteriously disappeared. Realizing the truth had come out, Dawn stammered and admitted that she really just couldn't control herself. Todd didn't want to hear it. Disappointed, he walked away. But just then, Shaun noticed Dawn's right hand twitching uncontrollably. Tracing it back, Shaun looked toward her brain and suspected she might have a tumor. He believed the tumor could be pressing on her central nervous system, causing her abnormal behavior. But after running an MRI, the scans showed her brain looked perfectly normal. Was Shaun wrong? They showed the scan results to Dawn, and she said that the past few months with Todd felt like a honeymoon. But now, here she was, lying in a hospital bed, a sad twist of fate. Shaun quietly turned and walked away, but Claire noticed something odd. She handed Dawn a tablet and asked her to draw a clock. To everyone's surprise, Dawn only drew half of the clock. That confirmed it. Something was definitely wrong with her brain. Further testing revealed that Dawn did have a tumor, but it was located in her chest. The proteins from the tumor traveled through the bloodstream to Dawn's brain, pressing on the right parietal cortex and causing neurological issues, including a loss of impulse control. As for the missing money, Dawn admitted she had donated it all to charity. Upon hearing that, Todd finally seemed ready to forgive her. But he had one more question. Just how many times had Dawn been unfaithful? Dawn paused for a moment, then finally said 4.5 times. Todd turned and walked out of the room, heartbroken. Later, Shaun successfully removed the tumor from Dawn. Now, at last, she was able to control her impulses again. And just then, Todd returned to the room. Despite the betrayal, he chose to forgive her. Alex and Shaun's new patient, Billy, was a teenager who had been regularly beaten. He had a dent in his forehead, a mark that had made him the target of ridicule his entire life. After examination, they discovered Billy had a fractured brow bone and serious lung contusions. After administering anesthesia, Shaun needed to make a small incision on Billy's side to insert a chest tube and re-expand the lung. An MRI would follow, and then Alex would operate to repair the bone fracture. If possible, they could also fix the dent in his forehead during the procedure. But as soon as Alex suggested it, Shaun rejected the idea. The dent had been there for years. It was difficult to fix, not life-threatening, and not worth wasting medical resources. While they performed the MRI, Alex asked if Shaun truly didn't feel sympathy for Billy. Shaun answered bluntly, he did feel sympathy. Looking at the scan, Shaun noticed that Billy's stomach had pushed through a gap in the diaphragm and moved into the chest cavity. Emergency surgery was needed. During the operation, Alex was still thinking about fixing Billy's forehead, but surprisingly, Lim, normally the more compassionate doctor, agreed with Shaun. It turned out Marcus was observing them, and she was simply saying what sounded good. Once they repaired the diaphragm, it was time to fix Billy's fractured brow. The doctors inserted a high-density polyethylene mesh to allow blood vessels and tissue to grow into it. Halfway through, Shaun suddenly had a bold idea. Why not treat Billy's forehead like a breast implant procedure? Everyone was confused by Shaun's change of heart. He explained that now was the best time. Low cost, low risk. They could simply insert silicone through the incision without needing extra surgery. It sounded brilliant, until after the implant was placed, Billy's heart rate suddenly started fluctuating. The silicone was putting pressure on the area behind his eyes, causing internal bleeding. Before they could react, Billy's heart flatlined. Thankfully, the room was full of experienced doctors. After intense emergency treatment, they brought him back. In the end, not only was Billy saved, his forehead was fixed too. Billy thanked Shaun from the bottom of his heart. But Shaun, still shaken, took full responsibility and admitted that his decision had nearly cost Billy his life. As Shaun walked out of the room, Alex followed him. Alex had realized something. Shaun wasn't cold or indifferent. He simply approached everything from a purely rational perspective. Then Alex pulled out a packet of painkillers. The hospital had prescribed them to Billy, but he hadn't taken a single pill. The medication was known to be addictive. It was very likely that Billy was being beaten because of this. Shaun didn't just fix the dent in Billy's forehead, he saved his future too. When an unknown virus began spreading inside an unprepared hospital, it quickly turned into a living nightmare. The first patient to fall ill was a man. Despite the medical team's best efforts, he died within minutes. At the same time, Shaun was treating another female patient when he noticed a red rash on her neck. His expression froze. Dozens of possibilities raced through his mind, but only one terrifying conclusion remained. He rushed over to the man's body, pulled back the curtain, and saw the same rash on his neck. It meant both patients had been infected with the same mysterious virus. The doctors asked the woman if she'd had contact with the man. She said they had flown on the same plane, but never interacted directly. That could only mean one thing: the virus was airborne. Everyone on the plane, and everyone in the ER, was now potentially exposed. Their fears were confirmed when the paramedic who had transported both patients showed the same red rash on his neck. Dr. Lim immediately reported the case to the hospital director and notified the quarantine authorities to lock down the ER. At the same time, she also shared the news with the innocent people still inside the room. Upon hearing the devastating news, everyone was thrown into a state of panic. Voices of protest filled the room. One man, desperate to escape, picked up a chair and tried to break through the door. Thankfully, Lim acted fast. She administered a tranquilizer to the man and brought the chaos under control. Though the crowd was momentarily calmed, the crisis was far from over. Inside the ER, many patients still awaited treatment, but only 3 doctors were available to help, one of them being Shaun, who was on the autism spectrum. And then came the most devastating blow. Dr. Lim, the most experienced doctor in the ER, noticed red rashes appearing on her body. She had been infected. With no other choice, she locked herself inside an isolation pod. Meanwhile, in the ER, a boy named Kellen suddenly broke into a violent coughing fit. People around him panicked, backing away in fear of getting infected. Only Shaun recognized the symptoms. It was just asthma. He tried to help, but the noise and chaos overwhelmed him, making it impossible for him to concentrate. Soon, Shaun collapsed to the floor, clutching his head, eyes shut tightly. At that moment, Alex risked being fired as he defied protocol and broke into the quarantined ER to find Kellen. But the inhaler needed for asthma treatment was locked away in the isolation zone. With no other options, Alex improvised and crafted a makeshift inhaler from available tools, finally easing Kellen's breathing. Yet Shaun's sensory overload hadn't been resolved. Even with earplugs, he was unable to function. Then Alex noticed something. The overhead light was emitting a high-pitched noise. This successfully helped Shaun regain his composure and return to treating patients. But the fear cast by the virus never stopped chasing them. The first 2 infected patients had both stopped breathing. Even Dr. Lim had collapsed inside her isolation pod. Just then, a pregnant woman named Viola called out for help. She was about to give birth. Her water had broken, but tragically, she was in the virus containment zone. There were no OB/GYNs and no specialized birthing equipment. Her child's survival now depended entirely on Shaun. Upon examination, Shaun discovered that the baby was in a transverse lie, positioned sideways in the womb. In normal cases, this would call for a C-section, but under these circumstances, it was simply impossible to do. Shaun attempted to manually reposition the baby, but due to his inexperience, Viola's pain triggered a placental abruption. At this point, Shaun had no choice but to ask the OB/GYN to guide him from outside the glass door. A makeshift operating table was quickly assembled in the ER. Shaun began his very first C-section surgery. The moment the operation started, everything went wrong. Viola's vitals plummeted. One wrong move, and both she and her baby would be lost. The anxious cries of Viola and the doctors only made it harder for Shaun to concentrate. Finally, Shaun snapped. He took a deep breath, centered himself, and with renewed focus, successfully delivered the baby. But the newborn wasn't breathing. Immediate CPR was needed. At the same time, Viola's incision hadn't been stitched up yet. Her uterus was bleeding heavily. Shaun couldn't split his attention. He could only save one. The OB/GYN outside reminded him of medical law. Priority must be given to saving the mother. But all the effort to deliver the baby would go to waste if it wasn't saved too. So Shaun made a bold decision. He found someone in the isolation group who could perform CPR. It was Kellen, the same boy who had suffered from asthma. Kellen took over the baby's resuscitation while Shaun used available materials to create a Bakri balloon, an emergency device for uterine bleeding. With great care, Shaun applied the pressure and finally managed to stop the hemorrhage. Outside the sealed ER, families waited in agonizing silence until suddenly the faint sound of a baby's cry echoed through the hallway. The baby had survived. Shaun handed the crying infant to Viola. It was nothing short of a miracle, and it gave everyone battling through the outbreak a much-needed dose of hope. But Lim's condition as an infected patient continued to worsen. Morgan, now caring for Lim, noticed that her breathing was barely detectable. Just as she was at a loss, Morgan found a face mask in the pocket of one of the deceased patients, and it had a tear in it. That meant the virus might be spread through droplets. Morgan immediately shared this clue with Marcus outside the quarantine zone, urging him to find a treatment solution. But time was running out for Lim. She stopped breathing. Her lungs had hardened, like steel. To keep her alive, the team had no choice but to use ECMO therapy. As a side note, ECMO played a major role during the COVID pandemic. But using ECMO under these emergency conditions involved huge risk. Marcus initially refused, but then remembered the impossible C-section that Shaun had just pulled off. He decided to take a leap of faith. With the virus confirmed to be transmitted through droplets, Lim gradually pulled through the critical stage with the help of ECMO. At last, the ER quarantine was lifted.